Hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast, where we explore things in a completely new way. Let me ask you this, when all the people you love most turn their backs on you and side with the betrayers, what would you do? This podcast brings you a story of betrayal, lost trust, and how the universe returned everything in the most unexpected way. Let's dive into today's story together. My name is Daniel, a 28-year-old man who once believed in the sanctity of family and love. Life took a dark turn when I discovered my ex-wife, Chloe, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. She had an affair with my brother, Mark. This betrayal sent shockwaves through my life, unraveling everything I had built. As I navigate through the wreckage of my emotional landscape, I find myself grappling with feelings of anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Looking back, I realize my childhood set the stage for this tumultuous journey. Growing up, I often felt overshadowed by Mark, the golden child, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Their favoritism stung like a wound, pushing me away and leading me to leave home at 18, desperate for independence. I thought marrying Chloe would fill the void left by my fractured family, but little did I know that my world was about to shatter. The fallout from Chloe's betrayal opened a Pandora's box of emotions, revealing the depths of my brother's treachery and the precariousness of familial bonds. What I once viewed as a supportive family turned out to be a facade that masked deep-rooted issues. As I embark on this journey of self-discovery, I must confront not only the pain of losing my marriage but also the realization that the people I trusted the most had betrayed me. Looking back on my childhood, I realize how deeply my relationship with my brother Mark was shaped by our parents' favoritism. From an early age, it was clear that Mark was the golden child, excelling in everything he did. Whether it was academics, sports, or even simple tasks around the house, he could do no wrong in the eyes of our parents. This constant comparison left me feeling inadequate and resentful. I struggled to gain their approval, and the emotional distance grew between us. By the time I turned 18, the weight of that resentment became unbearable. I left home, seeking independence and a chance to build a life free from the shadows of my brother's accomplishments. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into work and eventually marrying Chloe, hoping to find solace in our relationship. For a time, it seemed like I had finally carved out a place for myself. However, the scars of my past lingered beneath the surface, affecting how I approached relationships. I always felt a nagging sense of insecurity, as if I was somehow unworthy of love and happiness. Little did I know, those feelings would be further exacerbated by the betrayal that awaited me, shaking the very foundation of the life I had fought so hard to build. The echoes of my childhood would soon come back to haunt me in ways I could never have imagined. A year prior, Mark reached out to me, wanting to reconnect. The sudden desire to mend our fractured relationship surprised me, but I hesitated. After everything we'd been through, the thought of allowing him back into my life filled me with unease. However, I hoped that perhaps our family dynamics had changed and that we could start anew. So, I agreed to meet him, cautiously optimistic about the potential for healing. At first, our reconnection seemed promising. We shared stories, reminisced about our childhood, and laughed over old memories. I even introduced him to Chloe, believing that this was an opportunity for us to build a new family bond. The initial interactions felt positive, and I thought maybe we could finally put our past differences behind us. It was a moment of hope, a flicker of the brotherly connection I had longed for during our childhood. However, as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mark began visiting frequently, especially when I wasn't home. I found myself feeling uneasy about the growing closeness between him and Chloe. Despite my attempts to brush off my concerns, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a deeper betrayal that would unravel everything I had tried to rebuild. As time passed, the unease in my gut grew. Mark's frequent visits became more than just casual drop-ins, they were marked by an unsettling familiarity. I couldn't ignore the way he and Chloe exchanged glances, the subtle laughter that seemed to linger a bit too long in the air whenever I was away. The friendly banter began to feel invasive, a reminder of my childhood rivalry that I thought I had left behind. Each time I returned home to find them laughing together, it tugged at my heart, amplifying the whispers of suspicion in my mind. The tension escalated when Chloe announced her pregnancy. Instead of the joy I had anticipated, my instincts screamed that something was wrong. I was supposed to be excited, to share in the happiness of impending fatherhood, but the thought of Mark's increasing presence loomed over me like a dark cloud. The baby felt like a potential turning point, and the stakes suddenly felt much higher. Despite the smiles and congratulations, I couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of my family was cracking. Doubts swirled, leaving me feeling isolated and vulnerable. The image of the happy family I had envisioned began to shatter, replaced by a nagging dread that the very people I trusted the most might be hiding something sinister. The seeds of suspicion took root, and the air grew thick with tension, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Late one night, unable to shake my growing suspicions, I found myself unable to sleep. The house was quiet, but my mind was racing with doubt. I tiptoed into the living room, my heart pounding as I grabbed Chloe's phone, which lay carelessly on the coffee table. In that moment of desperation, I hoped to find some reassurance that my fears were unfounded. Instead, what I discovered shattered my world. Scrolling through her messages, my stomach dropped as I read words that cut deeper than any knife. The texts revealed a clandestine affair, a web of deceit spun between my wife and my brother that had been going on for months. Each message was a gut punch, confirming my worst fears. My hands trembled as I processed the implications of what I was reading. The betrayal was not only emotional, it was visceral. My heart raced as I realized that the baby Chloe was carrying wasn't mine, it belonged to Mark. The weight of the revelation crushed me. My mind reeled with disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. I could hardly breathe as I confronted the reality that the people I had trusted the most had not only deceived me but had also conspired against me in the most intimate way possible. The facade of my life crumbled, and I knew that a confrontation was inevitable. I would demand answers, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the aftermath of my devastating discovery, I turned to my parents for support, hoping they would stand by me in my time of need. I reached out, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and hope, thinking they would be shocked and ready to help me navigate this betrayal. However, their reaction was nothing like I had imagined. Instead of sympathy, they sided with Mark, urging me to forgive him and Chloe. Their words felt like a dagger to my heart. They painted my brother as a victim of circumstance, as if his betrayal was somehow excusable. My mother insisted that families should stick together, regardless of the pain it caused me. The very people I had hoped would provide solace only deepened my sense of betrayal. As they pleaded with me to mend the family ties, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. Their refusal to acknowledge the pain I was experiencing solidified my decision to cut ties with them. I realized that my family was not the supportive unit I had longed for but rather a collection of individuals more concerned with preserving appearances than protecting their own. The realization stung deeply, reinforcing my resolve to sever connections with those who had once been my anchors. In that moment, I understood that my journey toward healing would have to be taken alone. The divorce proceedings began almost immediately after the confrontation with Chloe. I thought the process would be straightforward, given the clear reasons for our separation, but I quickly discovered how wrong I was. Chloe and Mark had crafted a narrative that painted me as the villain, manipulating the story to garner sympathy from friends and family alike. They attempted to twist the truth, presenting me as the unreasonable husband who had failed to understand the complexities of their relationship. As the legal battles unfolded, it became clear that my ex-wife was willing to do anything to secure financial gain. She sought more alimony, citing her pregnancy and claiming that I was the cause of her emotional distress. My heart sank with each legal document I received, each one filled with lies and misrepresentations. It was a surreal experience, watching my life be dissected and misrepresented in court, while those I once trusted stood beside my betrayers. Despite the emotional turmoil, I managed to retain the house, but I faced significant financial loss due to the divorce settlement. The weight of the betrayal, combined with the pressure of legal proceedings, pushed me to my limits. I felt trapped in a nightmare, where the people I loved were now my greatest adversaries. With every hearing, the reality of my situation sank in further, solidifying my resolve to fight back and reclaim my life from the wreckage of my past. Feeling utterly alone and profoundly betrayed, I made the difficult decision to cut off all communication with my family and my ex-wife. The pain of their betrayal weighed heavily on me, but I knew that remaining connected to them would only prolong my suffering. It was time to prioritize my own well-being and focus on my healing journey. I blocked their numbers, shut down my social media accounts, and removed any reminders of them from my life. Each action felt like a small step toward reclaiming my autonomy, allowing me to breathe without the weight of their expectations and manipulations. The silence that followed was deafening yet liberating. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace as the chaos that had enveloped my life began to dissipate. With the absence of my family's influence, I was finally free to reflect on the emotional scars left by their betrayal. I sought therapy to help me process the trauma and rebuild my sense of self. It was a slow and often painful journey, but with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control of my narrative. The act of cutting ties was not just about severing relationships, it was a declaration of independence, a commitment to myself that I would no longer allow anyone to dictate my happiness or sense of worth. Months passed in relative silence, and I began to feel the faint stirrings of hope for a brighter future. However, that hope was quickly overshadowed when my mother reached out to me again, expressing her guilt over the family fallout. She implored me to reconsider my decision and help Mark financially, claiming he was struggling to find a job after the fallout from the affair. The moment I read her message, a surge of anger washed over me. How could she ask me to support the very person who had betrayed me in the most intimate way? I felt a mix of disbelief and outrage as I realized that my family's manipulation had not ceased, it had merely taken on a different form. I firmly replied, refusing to give in to their demands, reiterating that I was not responsible for Mark's choices or their consequences. Despite my resolute response, my mother persisted, using guilt as her weapon. It became clear to me that the family dynamics I had hoped to escape were still very much alive. I realized I needed to stand firm in my decision to prioritize my own mental health and well-being over their expectations. I had spent too long allowing their needs to dictate my actions, and it was time to put myself first. The resolve to remain distanced from them solidified further as I recognized their continued attempts to manipulate my sense of duty and loyalty. If you think the story is good, leave a comment with the number 1, and if not, please subscribe to the channel. If the video is helpful to you, don't forget to hit the like button. It was a quiet evening when the doorbell rang, interrupting the stillness of my apartment. I opened the door to find Mark standing there, his expression a mix of desperation and shame. He looked different, worn down by the weight of his choices, but I felt no sympathy. I stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding, as memories of our fractured relationship flooded back. "Daniel," he began, his voice cracking. "I need to talk to you. I'm really struggling after everything that happened." His words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of anger swell within me. How dare he come to me after everything? The betrayal still felt fresh, a wound that had not yet begun to heal. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the emotions that threatened to surge forth. "Struggling?" I echoed, my voice low and steady. "You think you can just show up here and ask for help after what you did? You ruined my life and thought I would just forget it." Mark's eyes filled with tears, and he pleaded, "I've lost everything, Daniel. I can't find a job, and I don't know where else to turn." I felt a flicker of anger mixed with pity, but it quickly dissipated. "You made your choices, Mark. You chose to betray me, and now you want me to help you? No. I won't be part of this." As I closed the door, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had stood my ground, but the encounter left a bitter taste in my mouth, a reminder that the scars of betrayal would take time to heal. Despite my efforts to distance myself from my family, my father reached out not long after Mark's visit. He called, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice as he spoke my name. "Daniel, we need to talk," he insisted. I felt my stomach churn. I wasn't ready for another confrontation. "About what?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but the anger simmered beneath the surface. "About your brother," he said, the concern in his tone unmistakable. "He's really struggling, and we need to come together as a family. He needs your support." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Why should I help him? He betrayed me in the worst possible way, and you expect me to just forget that because he's having a hard time? "Daniel, he's my son too." My father's voice grew louder, a hint of desperation creeping in. "We all make mistakes. You need to forgive him and be there for him." The gall of him. I couldn't believe he was siding with Mark yet again. "You're really asking me to choose family over my own well-being?" I shot back, anger rising. "Forgive and forget. That's what family does," he urged, attempting to guilt me into submission. I took a deep breath, fighting against the hurt and anger. "This isn't about forgiveness, it's about self-respect. I won't be manipulated into helping someone who betrayed me." With that, I hung up, knowing that the gap between us had widened even further. The weight of my father's expectations felt heavier, but I was determined not to bend to them again. After a series of manipulative attempts by my family, I felt an overwhelming need to draw a definitive line in the sand. The constant pressure and guilt trips had taken their toll, and I knew I had to put an end to it once and for all. It was time to send a clear message that I was serious about cutting ties and reclaiming my life. I drafted a final message to my parents, my fingers trembling as I typed the words. "I want no further contact with any of you. I need to focus on my own well-being, and I cannot do that with you in my life. If you continue to harass me, I will consider seeking a restraining order." As I clicked send, a wave of relief washed over me. It felt liberating to assert my boundaries, to take control of the situation after feeling so powerless for so long. I knew the repercussions would be significant, but I had reached a point where I was willing to face them. The emotional toll of their manipulation had pushed me to my limit, and I was no longer willing to tolerate their toxic influence. In that moment, I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. I had severed the ties that had bound me to a family that only brought pain and heartache. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a silence I had longed for, a quiet space where I could begin to heal and rediscover who I was without their shadows looming over me. Shortly after cutting ties with my family, I learned that Chloe was trying to sue me for more alimony. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. She was still trying to manipulate me even after everything that had happened. Determined not to let her control the narrative any longer, I resolved to prepare for the legal battle ahead. With the help of my lawyer, I gathered all the evidence I could find against her claims. I knew I had to be meticulous in my preparations, and I spent countless hours reviewing our financial records and documenting her deceitful behavior. I focused on building a solid case that would prove not only her dishonesty but also the emotional harassment I had endured from both her and Mark. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with a mixture of trepidation and determination. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I was resolute in my goal to reclaim my life. As the proceedings began, I sat quietly, listening to my lawyer lay out our case, each word reinforcing my resolve. She presented the evidence clearly, highlighting Chloe's manipulative tactics and the emotional toll her actions had taken on me. I felt a flicker of hope as the judge listened intently, the atmosphere in the room shifting. For the first time in a long time, I felt as though I was finally taking control of my narrative, and I was determined to fight until the very end. During the court proceedings, I sat at the defendant's table, my heart racing as I prepared for the battle ahead. Chloe had painted a picture of me as the villain, but I was determined to set the record straight. As my lawyer began her presentation, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation wash over me. She started by outlining the timeline of our relationship, highlighting key moments that illustrated my commitment to Chloe and our life together. Then she introduced the evidence we had painstakingly gathered, showing messages that revealed Chloe's manipulative behavior during and after our marriage. Each piece of evidence reinforced my stance, revealing the truth behind her facade. As the hearing progressed, I noticed the judge's demeanor shift. He listened intently, his expression one of growing skepticism toward Chloe's claims. My lawyer skillfully dismantled her narrative, emphasizing not just the financial aspects of the divorce but also the emotional distress Chloe had caused me. When it was Chloe's turn to speak, she attempted to portray herself as the victim of my supposed neglect and emotional unavailability. But her attempts to manipulate the situation fell flat under the scrutiny of the evidence. I could see the judge's patience waning as he leaned forward, clearly skeptical of her version of events. By the end of the hearing, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I had finally had the chance to share my truth, and it seemed that the court was beginning to recognize the extent of the manipulation I had endured. As we left the courtroom, I felt a surge of determination, knowing that I had stood my ground against the tide of lies. Following the court ruling, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. The judge had ruled in my favor, denying Chloe's request for additional alimony and acknowledging the harassment I had endured from both her and my family. As I walked out of the courtroom, I took a deep breath, allowing myself to finally feel a sense of relief. The outcome was a small victory, but it felt monumental after the emotional turmoil I had been through. In the days that followed, I made the difficult decision to block my family's numbers and social media accounts. This final act of severing ties felt liberating. I was no longer tethered to the toxic dynamics that had caused me so much pain. The silence that enveloped me was both eerie and comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos I had previously endured. I began to reflect on my journey, acknowledging the deep scars left by betrayal but also recognizing the strength I had gained. Therapy sessions became a sanctuary for me, a place to process my emotions and rebuild my self-worth. I started to explore new interests, reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. Slowly but surely, I felt my life shifting. I was no longer the person defined by betrayal. I was reclaiming my narrative and focusing on personal growth. Each step I took toward healing reaffirmed my commitment to self-respect and emotional well-being. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future, ready to embrace whatever came next. In the aftermath of my tumultuous journey, I embraced my new life with a sense of purpose and determination. I had faced the darkest moments of betrayal and emerged on the other side, stronger and more resilient than ever. The pain of my past no longer held me captive. Instead, it had become a catalyst for my growth. I focused on nurturing the friendships that had endured, surrounding myself with those who genuinely cared for my well-being. I began to rediscover passions that had long been buried under the weight of my previous life: hiking, painting, and even volunteering for causes I believed in. Each new experience reinforced my sense of identity, helping me heal the wounds that had once felt insurmountable. As I looked toward the future, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I resolved to never allow my family back into my life, solidifying my commitment to self-respect and emotional well-being. I understood that life would have its challenges, but I now possessed the tools to face them head-on. With each passing day, I became more confident in my ability to shape my own narrative. I had reclaimed my autonomy and recognized that my worth was not dictated by the opinions or actions of others. I ended this chapter of my life with a sense of liberation, ready to embrace new opportunities and adventures that awaited me. My journey was far from over, but I was finally prepared to write the next part of my story on my own terms. If you think the story is good, leave a comment with the number 1, and if not, please subscribe to the channel. If the video is helpful to you, don't forget to hit the like button.